when Yuri handed me the breakup fee for the 19th time. I agreed. The girl he adored was clamoring for a legitimate status, and couldn't wait any longer. I couldn't wait either. I was pregnant. And the baby wasn't his. After signing the agreement, I immediately took a photo and sent it to Yuri. I've signed it. Do you want Assistant Shang to come and get it? 20 minutes slipped by quietly. Yuri's chat box was as silent as if dead. I was just thinking about whether to call for an intra-city express delivery when I saw Yuri already standing at the door. Slightly out of breath. He actually came in person. Well, it made sense. His little mistress had been making a big fuss all over the city for half a year just to get a legitimate status. It seemed that he was really in a hurry. Tell me, what kind of trick do you want to play this time? I've given you everything that should be given. His voice was cold, with a hint of impatience. 3 years ago, Yuri gave me a wedding. Since then, I had become Mrs. Yuri in name. I accompanied him all the way from being down and out to achieving great success. But in the past 6 months, he had been thinking about how to dump me. Just to make room for that little canary. He had already revised the property division agreement up to the 19th version. Before, I wasn't satisfied. This time I obediently signed it. But instead he became suspicious. I gave a light chuckle and showed him the agreement. He opened it doubtfully. And when he saw that I had really signed my name, his face darkened. Autumn, do you really agree? I looked at him strangely. In the past, he always said that what he hated the most was my being unreasonable and randomly jealous. Now that I was not making a fuss and fulfilling his wish by taking the money and leaving, why did he seem even more unhappy? Surely he didn't expect me to cry and beg him to stay? I smiled. Isn't this good? You can marry Rosa openly. And I can also replan my life. In this agreement, there were houses, cars, and company shares. All kinds of things. He had also made a great sacrifice. I accepted everything. After all, it was me who had accompanied him through those years when he was nobody. Who would really be willing to plant the tree for others to enjoy the shade? Now it was all right. Over the years, my own fortune, plus what he was going to give me. Even if I started traveling around the world tomorrow, it would be enough for me to live the rest of my life in affluence. Although love was gone, fortunately I still had a lot of money. After hearing my words, Yuri looked at me with a complex gaze and hesitated to speak. At this time, a delicate and soft female voice interrupted us. Autumn, thank you for being willing to help us. Rosa, the canary that Yuri adored deeply. She was a golden phoenix flying out of the mountains. She had an ordinary second-tier university degree. It was already very difficult for her to enter the highly competitive Yuri family group. But she also became Yuri's president's office secretary in just 3 months. She really worked hard at seducing Yuri. Yuri said she was pure and kind, and was always afraid that I would bully her. But what kind of pure and kind person would have an affair with a married man and send the bed photos to his wife? In the past, I couldn't let it go and cried, and made a scene bitterly. I was once so angry that I exposed them on the internet. As a result, the next day, there was no trace left at all. Yuri's methods had always been neat and efficient. Ironically, one day, he would actually use these methods on me too. After all this trouble, I was already tired of it. I looked at the two of them with a half smile, not wanting to say one more word. Now that you've got the agreement, why don't you leave? I gave the order to leave. This villa was under my name. Since Yuri started seeing his mistress frequently, he rarely came back here. If they stayed one more second, I would want to disinfect the whole house. Yuri's face darkened. Autumn, the ploy of feigning indifference won't work on me. Since you dared to sign, don't regret it. After that, he pulled Rosa and walked outside. Wait. I stopped Yuri. He looked back at me with an expression that seemed to say, I knew it. Probably thinking that I was reluctant to let him go again, but I just reminded him, don't forget to transfer the money as soon as possible. And Transfer the real estate to me as soon as possible. His expression froze for a second. And then he said through gritted teeth, "You're in such a hurry." In a hurry? How could I not be in a hurry? I was pregnant. And it wasn't his. If I didn't part ways with him soon, it would be hard to end this well. I made an appointment for a prenatal checkup. But I didn't expect to meet Yuri and Rosa at the hospital. He held her hand carefully. Rosa chattered away. And he listened patiently, with a gentle and affectionate look in his eyes. They were so intimate, as if there was no room for a third person. Memories flooded back. A long time ago. He had also cherished me like a precious treasure. It's been too long. The last time he looked at me like that was when I had a miscarriage. At that time, I was for months pregnant. He had his first mistress outside. She was a fearless girl. She rushed to my place aggressively, asking me to make room for her. I scolded her for being shameless. But she said that the one not being loved was the mistress. Perhaps her self-esteem was greatly hurt. And she pushed me hard. And just like that, the baby was gone. I was covered in blood and sent to the operating room. When I woke up again, the first thing I saw was Yuri with a look of self-blame on his face. His eyes were full of guilt. He held my hand tightly and sobbed, "I'm sorry. QIU. I'm such an asshole. Hit me if you want. I'm sorry." I slapped him hard. He didn't even dodge. Just endured it. When I was tired of hitting, he said in a hoarse voice, "Just this once. QIU. Give me a chance to make it up to you. Okay? We will have another baby." He sent that girl away. He became a considerate lover again. Unfortunately, it only lasted for half a year. Half a year later, there was a new girl by his side. And then, those girls kept changing. One after another of those young and delicate faces. Before I could even remember them, new ones showed up. Rosa was the one who stayed by his side the longest. Running into them in the obstetrics and gynecology department this time was really a bit awkward. I turned around and wanted to leave. Unexpectedly, Rosa's voice stopped me. "Sister Autumn. What a coincidence." She was like a big pendant, hanging on Yuri. Her face was also flushed, looking a bit shy. "I'm pregnant. I'm here to see the doctor." I looked at her performance expressionlessly. Yuri saw the registration form in my hand and frowned. "What are you here to see a doctor for?" I smiled coldly. "Mr. Yuri, in front of your new mistress. It's best not to be too curious about your ex-wife's privacy." He seemed a bit irritable, and actually pushed Rosa beside him aside and grabbed my wrist. "Autumn, I'm your man. Since you suddenly appear in the obstetrics and gynecology department, I have the right to ask." I stared at him steadily, and my tone couldn't help but carry a bit of mockery. "My man? Mr. Yuri. Are you sure? Although we had a wedding. But in the marriage registration system, I have always been unmarried." Yuri was stunned for a moment, as if he suddenly remembered something, and his eyes became even gloomier. Yes, that wedding back then was so romantic and grand. In the eyes of outsiders, I was his only Mrs. Yuri, especially in these years. Our business and equity distribution were intricately intertwined. But who knew? In fact, we had never been to the Civil Affairs Bureau. Whenever I urged Yuri to get the marriage certificate with me, he was either going to a meeting or on a business trip abroad. His time was always so precious. So precious that in a full 3 years, he couldn't spare half an hour to accompany me to get a marriage certificate. It just so happened that when we broke up, we fell out over the issue of money and power distribution, making it known to everyone. My wrist hurt from his grip, but he just wouldn't let go. Fortunately, not long after, a number calling device called my name. "Please ask patient Totem to go to consulting room now. 5 for treatment." Only then did Yuri reluctantly let go of my hand. I immediately walked past him and Rosa, and entered the consulting room, and locked the door by the way, completely ignoring Yuri's extremely dark face. After carefully reading my examination report, the doctor gave me some instructions. He also told me to bring the baby's father with me next time. He's dead. These words were like a thunderbolt. The doctor, who was originally focused on writing the medical record, quickly looked up, with sympathy flooding his eyes. He changed to a consoling tone and told me to accept my misfortune with resignation. I also cooperatively showed a sad expression. Maybe it was because of the early pregnancy. I was a bit sleepy. Since I came back from the hospital, I had been sleeping all the time. In a daze. I had a lot of dreams. At first, I had just graduated from college. It was when Yuri's family went bankrupt and he was living on the streets. I huddled with him in a narrow rental house. He hugged me, wrapped me in his down jacket, and let me lean on his chest where his heart was. QIU, when I'm rich, I will definitely not let you suffer anymore. I will hire at least 5 people. 1 to cook for you, 1 to wash your clothes, 1 to make your bed. His vigorous heartbeat was in my ear. I blushed from his love words and naively believed that the love in his mouth could overcome all difficulties. Later, he really made a comeback and achieved great success. Only, there were more and more people around him. Those people came and went, like the love that Yuri couldn't hold on to. At the end of the dream, there was a mess everywhere. And on the broken porcelain pieces, I was bleeding from the soles of my feet and crying hysterically. He watched me go crazy infuriately and said casually, "Autumn, you look really ugly like this." At that moment, I looked at him. The person I had deeply loved when we were young seemed to suddenly rot. When I woke up, it was already getting dark. I was in a daze and was about to get up. Suddenly, a voice startled me. I heard that, "You are pregnant with my child. Yet you go around spreading rumors that I'm dead." I shivered and looked in the direction of the voice. There, in front of the French window, a man was looking at me. The moonlight shone down, coating his originally dark-colored suit with a layer of silver luster. The room was unlit, and he was hidden in the darkness. If he hadn't spoken, it would have been really hard to notice him. "Leo, are you trying to scare someone to death? You're too much." Leo was so angry at my words that he laughed instead. He walked to the bedside and scooped me into his arms. His warm body temperature came through my thin nightgown, and his palm gently rubbed my lower back. When he spoke again, his tone was extremely helpless. "Who is the one being too much here?" "Autumn. First, you slept with me and ran away. Now, you want to run away with my child?" For Leo guessed it right. My plan was to take the child and find a small town to settle down in. Far away from Yuri. Also far away from Leo. After all, the way we started was not honorable. It was 3 months ago. On my birthday, Yuri volunteered to accompany me on my birthday one last time before we parted. For good luck. To part on good terms. He booked a restaurant early. A table by the window, from which the night view could be seen all at once. He came to pick me up at home, as if nothing had changed between us. He presented the cake to me, and personally placed and lit the candles. Make a wish. At his urging, I closed my eyes with mixed feelings to cooperate with him and murmured in my heart, "My wishes." It was about 10 seconds. When I opened my eyes again, I looked at the empty seat opposite me, completely at a loss. Yuri had disappeared. I waited for quite a while longer, but he didn't come back. Finally, the waiter came to inform me, saying, "Mr. Yuri just left after receiving a phone call. He instructed that you can leave directly after finishing your meal. He will pay for all the expenses today." I watched the candles on the cake burn out and the cream gradually collapse. The words "Happy Birthday" turned into ugly red patches. Finally, I laughed mockingly. After leaving the restaurant, I took a taxi to the port. When we were poor before and couldn't afford to travel elsewhere, Yuri always liked to take me for a walk at the port. He always said that if we couldn't see new scenery, it was nice to feel the sea breeze. Later, the sea was still the same sea. But the person had long changed. I walked aimlessly for a long time. Until suddenly someone nearby exclaimed, "Oh my God. This is so romantic." I followed their line of sight to look at the night sky above the sea. In the pitch-black sky, countless drone lights were twinkling. They formed romantic cursive words. "Rosa. I love you." A few seconds later, countless flowers bloomed in the night sky. Gorgeous and beautiful. The passers-by all sighed, "Oh my God. Which young master is showing his love this time?" Alas. Today is another day of being a mediocre NPC in this world. I almost masochistically open my WeChat moments. Sure enough, I saw Oz's show-off post. True love is that no matter what time it is, as long as I say I miss him, he can give me a confession. The picture attached was exactly the photo of the drone confession. 5. When a person's heart is completely broken, they will probably become almost like a madman. I bought a lot of alcohol to drink. There were too many people at the seaside. Yuri and Rosa were together, surrounded by unaware passers-by. And they didn't notice me at all. But I watched them for a very long time. Until I realized that there were already empty wine bottles all around me and my vision began to blur. I realized that it would be really bad if I continued drinking. So I got up and left instantly. Finally, after leaving the noisy port, I walked along the road and bumped into someone head-on. "Be careful." He held my hand to steady me. I straightened up and saw who it was. Leo. A big shot in the Shanghai business circle and the heir to the Leo family group. Over the years, because of business investments, I had some dealings with him. It could be said that 2/3 of my wealth was almost all earned back by relying on this big tree. He was completely different from Yuri. There was hardly an opposite-sex person around him. People in the circle joked that he might be gay. He never refuted it either. "Autumn?" He held me up and frowned. "Why have you drunk so much?" He smelled nice. Very clean. Unlike Yuri, who always had Rosa's perfume on him. "Leo. They all say that you like men. Is it true?" Somehow, I just blurted it out. My tongue was a bit numb. Probably because of the alcohol. Leo was first stunned, then sighed helplessly and carefully helped me into his Rolls-Royce. Maybe he was very much to my taste. Maybe the alcohol numbed my reason. Or perhaps, I just wanted to take revenge on Yuri in a disguised form. I silently moved closer to Leo and took the initiative to kiss him on the cheek. He turned his head and looked at me in astonishment. At that instant, his pupils trembled. A faint blush tinged his cold white skin. The next second, I was extremely bold and straddled him. "Leo, do you want to have a try with me?" We were so close that my lips gently brushed against his earlobe. It was surprisingly soft. So I simply kissed it. His earlobe was slightly hot. His voice rang above my head. A little hoarse. "Autumn. Be sober." I laughed. "I am sober. I know that you men all like young and beautiful women. And you can get rid of a woman with just a word of, 'I'm tired of you.'" The restlessness in my body rose. And I subconsciously wanted to lean towards a cooler place. His brows furrowed slightly. And his eyes were gloomy and unclear. I raised my head to ask for a kiss again. This time, he didn't dodge. His lips were ice-cold, and had a fresh minty scent. It smelled very nice. The kiss made me dizzy, and I was almost suffocating. But he held the back of my head with one hand and pinched my waist with the other, forcing me to continue. The partition in the car rose in time, completely separating it into an enclosed space. He finally let me go. His voice even hoarser than before. "Autumn. I don't like men. Nor do I like the young." Huh? His reaction was so slow. "We've already kissed. Why mention this?" The alcohol wouldn't make me black out. But my mind was indeed a bit. Before I could figure it out, Leo had already started the car. Soon, we arrived at the destination. Leo picked me up horizontally from the back seat. He carried me through the living room of the villa, quickly went upstairs into the bedroom, and carefully laid me down. He stood beside the bed, looking down at me. My eyes were fixed on his lips without blinking. Lips that had just been kissed were moist, with a touch of water vapor, a little swollen and red. Looking down, 2 buttons on his shirt collar had been unfastened by him. His collarbone was exposed in the air. He was like a seductive male demon. He curved his lips and held my hand and slipped it under his shirt. Autumn. Do you want it? Yes. After getting a satisfactory answer, Leo leaned over and kissed my lips. Unlike the previous 2 times, this time he kissed deeply and passionately, as if to express his strong possessiveness. The passionate kiss moved downward. Autumn. Do you like it? My face was almost on fire, and I could only cling tightly to Leo. At first, I bit my lip hard and didn't answer. Finally, I was defeated under Leo's onslaught. I buried my face in his neck and whimpered, yes. He kissed me with satisfaction. Finally, I fell into a deep sleep in his arms. When I woke up the next day, he was already gone. I understood what this meant. He should be a person who was afraid of trouble. Just as well, I was also afraid of trouble. Since he had left, naturally, I also had to pretend that nothing had happened. This was good for both of us. So I slipped away, and also blocked all his contact information, cutting off all ties cleanly, to avoid embarrassment. As for business dealings, let the subordinates handle them in the future. Just be businesslike. Since then, Leo and I hadn't seen each other again. Until a few days ago. My period was late. And then I belatedly remembered after that incident. It seemed that I hadn't taken the contraceptive pill. I secretly bought a pregnancy test stick. As a result, I tested it 5 times in a row. And every time there were 2 lines. I was full of question marks. After the last miscarriage, the doctor said that it would be more difficult for me to get pregnant again in the future. What happened to the so-called difficulty? How could Leo get me pregnant in just 1 time? I was at a loss. Logically speaking, Leo had the right to know. But thinking of his attitude that day, I wasn't sure either. Just in case, I didn't say anything, and only prepared to break up with Yuri quickly and then properly arrange the future for me and my child. Unfortunately, before I could make arrangements, Leo came to me. Autumn. Why did you block me? His lips were close to my ear. His voice was cold, but warm breath spilled out from his lips and teeth. Don't tell me. You regretted it after sleeping with me? His attitude left me a little dumbfounded. I didn't expect that he would care so much about me blocking him. To avoid more misunderstandings, I decided to make it clear. Leo, we are all adults. I started it that night. So I took it for granted that I would bear the consequences myself. You were able to find out about the hospital. So you should also know. I will definitely keep the baby. I have money. I can solve the matter of raising the baby on my own and won't cause you any trouble. If you are really worried, we can sign a confidentiality agreement. Leo, who was originally kissing my earlobe, suddenly froze, and his voice became even lower. You'll do it alone? What if the child asks about his father? What if he wants to see his father's photo? I had also thought this over carefully. I will tell the child that his father is dead. As for the photo, it can be AI synthesized. As for the cause of death, let's just say it was a car accident. If you are not satisfied, you can also make up a more decent way of dying for yourself. Of course, if you want to see the baby in the future, it doesn't matter either. Just let him call you uncle. Leo frowned first. And at the end, he was actually so angry that he laughed. Call me uncle? Autumn. What on earth do you take me for? I was choked for a moment, and couldn't quite figure out what he meant. How come I had even thought out a fallback plan for him, and he was still not satisfied? Leo, I just don't want to trouble you too much. After all, you left quite simply that day. As I was speaking, I observed Leo's expression, and thought about other possibilities. Could it be that he knew I was pregnant and changed his mind and wanted to fight me for the custody of the baby? Only to see Leo take a deep breath several times before he reluctantly spoke again. I don't think you are a trouble. I was slightly stunned. There was a faintly absurd guess in my heart. Leo looked at me with extremely deep eyes and began to explain earnestly. That gay. There was a problem with the project of my French branch company, and I had to go and deal with it in person. I left you a note, asking you to wait for me to come back. So, you actually didn't see anything at all. A note? I really didn't see it. In this era of advanced technology, why did he still write a note? Besides, I was so embarrassed that I just wanted to run away quickly. How could I have the mind to see if there was a note on the bedside? Leo continued to complain. When I wanted to contact you again, I found that you had actually blocked all my contact information. Autumn. In your eyes. Am I something shameful? I smiled awkwardly. That's a bit too much. But it's impossible for the two of us to get married just because we slept together. Right? He lowered his eyes and asked rhetorically, why not? I suddenly opened my eyes wide. A little incredulously. Are you serious? Leo. Do you like children so much? Leo's eyes were extremely deep. He stared at me for a long time, with a slightly lazy look in his eyes. And his voice sounded deep. Just think that I like children. 8, of course. I didn't agree to Leo. This is too ridiculous. Yuri and I went from supporting each other to being sick of each other. After so many years of entanglement, the ending was not satisfactory. I don't want to jump into another fenced-in area casually again. Leo didn't force me. He just stared at me until I added all his contact information back. He also said that I must inform him when I go for another prenatal checkup. I frowned. Is it necessary? I don't know if it was an illusion. There seemed to be a sense of gnashing of teeth in his smile. Aren't you the one who said I like children? How could a person who likes children let you go for a prenatal checkup alone? All right. I respect his rights as the biological father. What's more, he is still my cash cow in business. I still have to give him some face. Since then, Leo began to care about my food, clothing and diet, and would also buy baby supplies. Once, when he was on a business trip to Europe, he even personally pushed back a hand-made baby crib customized by a master. The baby crib was also stuffed with all kinds of diapers, milk powder and baby cream. He seemed really looking forward to the arrival of the baby. Slowly, as time passed, I got used to it, until the auction half a month later, when Leo and I entered together. We met Yuri. Rosa held Yuri's hand, and there was unconcealed pride in her eyes. It had been a long time since we last met. When Yuri saw me standing beside Leo, he was rarely stunned for a moment. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something to me, but Rosa didn't give him this opportunity. Dear, I'm a little tired. Accompany me to sit over there. Okay? Before leaving, she still didn't forget to look back and leave me a mocking smile. I ignored it. After all, being pregnant, I had to stay away from these disgusting sources as much as possible. At this auction, the exhibits were rather ordinary, and I was not very interested, until I saw a necklace. That collection item was very beautiful. It was a piece that I had liked many years ago but had been unable to buy for a long time. The starting price was 800. I was the first to raise my paddle. Rosa was not to be outdone and kept increasing the price after me. 1 million. 1.5 million. Finally, Yuri raised his paddle. 3 million. He knew very well that I had wanted this necklace for a long time, but he still came to compete with me and deliberately gave it to Rosa. I glanced in their direction, and happened to meet Rosa's complacent expression. I knew that Rosa might not like it that much. She just didn't want to see me having an easy time. 3 million. The first time. 3 million. The second time. I didn't raise my paddle again. Leo pinched my hand, wanting to increase the price. 5. Before he could finish speaking, I quickly grabbed his hand. 5 what? Are you crazy? His expression was a bit innocent. 5 million is not expensive either. Don't you like it very much? I snorted. Why isn't it expensive? You just have never been poor. Only those who have really been poor know that 5 million is really expensive. When people are in desperate straits, let alone 5 million, they might fight desperately for 500 yuan. But this kind of truth is probably hard for Leo, who is out of touch with the real world, to empathize with. I shook my head. Stop competing. I don't like things that cost me a loss. The 3 million that Yuri offered has far exceeded the value of that necklace itself. If he is willing to be a sucker, let him be. Anyway, Yuri had already signed the property division agreement long ago. Now the money he spends is all from his own share. Although 3 million is not a large amount, many a little makes a mickle. I can't wait for him to spend more and become poorer. 3 million. The third time. Sold. The fall of the auction hammer meant that everything was settled. After it ended, people walked out one after another. Rosa deliberately walked up to me and started showing off as soon as she opened her mouth. Autumn. Are you angry? It's all Yuri. When he saw that I liked it, he didn't care. I'll let you have a look. Yuri, who was beside her, silently watched this scene. He really doted on Rosa, and let her provoke me again and again. I slightly curled my lips. No need. I don't like it that much. If you like it, just take it. After all, what can be so good about the things you fancy? I glanced meaningfully at Yuri beside her. Yuri's face visibly dark and a few shades. And he said angrily, Autumn, how have you become like this? It's just a necklace. Is it necessary to be so acrimonious? At worst, I'll compensate you with one in the future. I looked up, stunned for a moment, and then stared fixedly at him. No need. Just as you said. It's just a necklace. I don't lack it. Yuri was choked for a moment. And then he seemed to finally remember something. I am a jewelry designer. At the beginning, the first pot of gold for his company was obtained by me selling my design copyright, which got him 1 million. At that time, he held me with red-eyed and said that he would buy a lot of jewelry for me in the future. Unfortunately, in the end, he only gave me an ordinary ring. I had been his girlfriend for 4 years and his wife for 3 years. With a very small diamond. He deceived me out of my most precious 7 years. A promise is sincere only at the moment it is made. And sincerity is something that changes in an instant. In the end of love, it all depends on one's conscience over a long journey. Now, he has his company. And I also have my own career. My jewelry design brand has long been world famous. If I like something, I can buy it myself. I don't need him long ago. Yuri probably remembered the past and was a bit distracted. When he looked at me again, there was a bit of guilt and nostalgia in his eyes. At this time, Leo's tall figure suddenly stepped in, completely blocking Yuri's gaze at me. His voice was lazy, but full of sarcasm. Mr. Yuri, haven't seen you for a few years. Your taste has changed. You like green tea bitches now? When he said, green tea bitches, Leo casually glanced at Rosa. Rosa forced herself not to explode. But the expression on her whole face was almost distorted from suppressing her anger. I was too lazy to watch anymore. Leo. Let's go. My act of calling his name in public seemed to please Leo. He curved his lips and smiled. Okay. I thought that everything would end here, and it should be quiet at last. Who knew that Yuri suddenly regretted it? 9. I habit of setting my mobile phone to silent when I sleep. When I woke up that day, the screen showed that there were several missed calls and messages. All were from Yuri. Autumn. Let's talk. I'm coming to find you. There's no one at home. Where are you? What kind of illness did you go to the obstetrics and gynecology department of the hospital to check last time? Are you pregnant? If you are pregnant, I can promise not to break up with you. If you don't reply, I will keep waiting for you at the door. Autumn. Why were you out all night? Why did you even dismiss the servants? Because I had already moved out long ago. There were traces of his life in that house. I felt uncomfortable living there, so I simply sold the house. After Leo learned about it, as the father of the child, he kindly provided an island villa and also hired a private doctor and a nurse. The island has a beautiful environment and a pleasant climate, which is especially suitable for prenatal care. I didn't refuse. In this kind of thing, whoever refuses is a fool. Since Leo wants to enjoy the rights of being a father, he naturally has to be willing to pay a price. This is called an equivalent exchange. Gradually, this kind of tacit understanding has been formed between Leo and me. As for Yuri, according to the agreement, he still has a lot of property that has not been transferred to me. At this time, how could he possibly go back on his word? I immediately called him back. Yuri's voice came from the receiver. Tired and a little hoarse. Autumn. I asked the former servants, and they said they noticed that you were taking miscarriage prevention drugs. If it's true, then we cannot break up first. Suddenly, I lost my patience. When a person is unlucky, even taking medicine can be secretly noticed by the servants and toweled on. Fortunately, I understand the truth that paper can't wrap fire, and I have been mentally prepared for a long time. Before Yuri could finish speaking, I calmly interrupted him. I am pregnant. But Yuri, who said the child is yours? There was a long silence on the other side of the phone. I could almost hear Yuri's rapid breathing. After a while, he coldly asked in reply, Autumn, what do you mean? 10 When Yuri finally found me by following the clues. I was playing with Egg Yolk. Egg Yolk is a little yellow dog adopted for me by Leo for fear that I would be bored. It is gentle and affectionate. It likes lying at my feet and basking in the sun the most. When Yuri saw me, he was stunned. You are really here. If I remember correctly, the real estate here should be under the Leo family's name. He stared fixedly at my stomach as if he wanted to stare a hole in me. When on earth did you? I tilted my head and smiled, telling him, do you remember the day I gave birth? The night when you left halfway, and used to groan to confess your love to Rosa. Yuri's eyes widened, and he looked at me in disbelief. Finally, he spat out a sentence with a trembling voice. Autumn. Before we even broke up, you have already cuckolded me? In his eyes, it seemed that I was the one who made the mistake and was more worthy of being blamed as a betrayer. I couldn't help but laugh mockingly and asked him in reply, then over the years, when the lovers around you have changed one after another, when you rolled in bed with Rosa and made her pregnant, did you ever think of me? He knew he was in the wrong, and couldn't defend himself. He stood there for a long time before reluctantly spitting out a sentence. QIU. You abort the child. Let's stop making trouble. I'll go to the Civil Affairs Bureau with you to get the marriage certificate. Let's get married and live a good life in the future. Okay? I was so angry that I laughed. I stared at his eyes without blinking. Abort? Do you think it's possible? I had a miscarriage before, and the doctor said it would be very difficult for me to have a child again in the future. Why did I have a miscarriage in the first place? Have you forgotten? What right do you have to decide whether my child stays or goes? His body swayed, and pain flashed in his eyes. Okay. Then you give birth. When you recover in the future, let's have a child of our own. Okay? I seemed to have heard the biggest joke in the world. I couldn't help but look at him as if he were a lunatic. Do you want to listen to what you are saying? His eyes were red, and he made his last concession. QIU. For you. I can recognize this child as mine. Just then, a low sneer came from not far away. It was Leo who had arrived. He loosened the top button of his shirt, and as soon as he opened his mouth, he mockingly said in a lazy tone, You want my child to call you father? Yuri, are you worthy? For a while, the atmosphere was extremely tense. The moment Yuri saw Leo, it was as if his reverse scale had been touched, and he rushed forward like a madman. Leo, it's you. Unfortunately, before he could tear into Leo as he wished, he was stopped by the bodyguards in the villa. He probably forgot whose home this was. Yuri's eyes were scarlet, and he tried to break free from the bodyguards to have a big fight with Leo. But the reality was cruel. With a casual flick of the bodyguard, he fell embarrassingly on the floor, and Leo just sat on the sofa with his legs crossed, looking at him expressionlessly. His face as cold as frost and snow. Will you leave by yourself? Or should I have someone throw you out? I was a little surprised. Although Leo has a noble identity, his self-cultivation has always been praised by others, even when facing business rivals. I haven't seen him lose his composure and humiliate anyone. It was the first time I had seen him so angry. Yuri came alone, even though he was unwilling. It was of no avail. His face was haggard as he staggered to his feet and handed a box to me. I didn't open it. It was a blue velvet box, and I could probably guess what was inside. It was the necklace that Rosa had snatched away. The one I had been longing for a long time. He lowered his head and told me, QIU. On the day of the auction. I didn't really mean to snatch away the thing you liked. I just wanted to make you jealous and make you give in to me. I've got the necklace back for you. I'll make Rosa have an abortion. Don't you like this necklace very much? Let's make up. Okay? Yes. I used to like it so much. He clearly knew that, but still helped Rosa and used it to humiliate me. He also knew that every time I cried and made a fuss with him in the past, I was extremely sad. But he still hurt me again and again. I said faintly, I don't like it anymore now. Neither the necklace nor you. I don't like them anymore. Yuri's face turned pale. QIU. Stop being so stubborn. Okay? Are you really willing to part with me? I just found it ridiculous. In the beginning, it was clearly he who hurt me the most. How could he now pose as if he was the victim? I looked at his slightly red eyes, pulled the corner of my clothes out of his hand, and said earnestly, Yuri, it was you who destroyed all of this with your own hands. If we are going to part, then part completely. Don't let me look down on you anymore. 3 days later, Yuri and I completed the final property settlement at the notary office. Yuri looked extremely haggard. There was a tinge of black under his eyes, obviously not having slept well. However, whether he was doing well or not now had nothing to do with me. At the moment of parting ways, Yuri seemed to have something to say to me. But before he could say it, Rosa suddenly appeared. All the pretense of gentleness on her face was gone. Instead, there was anger and unwillingness. Yuri, she already has someone else's child. Why are you still giving her so much? I thought you were just giving her a breakup fee. But how could you even transfer the 80 million yuan villa to her? Have you ever thought about me and the child in my belly? I frowned slightly. Perhaps Rosa didn't know that what Yuri gave me was not just a simple breakup fee. I had shares in every business he had done and every sum of money he had earned in the past. Without me in the beginning, how could he be where he was today? I just got the part that I deserved as I wished. Moreover, Rosa was too impatient. Yuri's love came strongly but also briefly. It was not a good thing that her gentle and loving wife personified so quickly. Autumn, don't try to take advantage. Rosa frantically accused me and rushed forward recklessly. Enough. Yuri shouted angrily and stopped her. Are you done? Don't make a fool of yourself here. Rosa's body stiffened from the scolding, and her eyes instantly turned red. She threw the LV bag in her hand hard at Yuri. Make a fool of myself? How can you shout at me? You've already broken up with her. Do you still want to protect her? More and more passers-by gathered around to watch. Yuri's expression became more and more disgusted. And finally he exploded. Even if I don't marry Autumn, I won't marry you either. Rosa was directly stunned by the shout. The next second, she realized something and chased after him with a panicked expression, trying to hold Yuri's hand. But Yuri was completely indifferent and threw her aside forcefully. Stay away from me. The accident happened at this moment. Rosa always liked to dress up. Even after getting pregnant, she was still unbridled and still walked around in her delicate sheepskin high-heeled shoes. She liked to show off Yuri's love for her with those things. As a result, with Yuri's sudden throw, she stepped on air and rolled several times down the stairs. She lay on the ground, covering her stomach with a pale face, crying out in pain, "My baby! Yuri! My stomach hurts so much!" Yuri also panicked at the sight, and his face was very ugly. After about 4 or 5 seconds, bright red blood flowed out between Rosa's legs. My heart trembled at the sight. Once upon a time, my child with Yuri was lost in this way. Was it fate? For those who are promiscuous and unfaithful, their family bonds are doomed to be shallow. Or perhaps the baby could also sense in its mother's body that it was not loved by its father. So it left sadly. Although the world is wonderful, it doesn't want to come back again. 12 With Rosa's commotion like this, the matter between Leo and me finally reached the ears of Leo's family members. The next day, Leo's grandfather ordered Leo to return to the old house. He also specifically named that he wanted to see me. In the car, I couldn't help feeling nervous. Leo comforted me that his grandfather was easygoing. I believed him. As a result, from the moment he entered the door, the old man's brows had never relaxed. Although the old man was already 80 years old and needed to walk with a cane, his face was majestic and he naturally had an air of authority. He squinted his eyes and said in an unrefusable tone, "Kneel down." The majestic voice resounded throughout the entire hall. Leo didn't say a word. He took off his suit jacket and knelt down straight. Even I, following behind, was so shocked that I shivered. Could it be that I also have to kneel? I was full of questions. As a result, as soon as Leo's grandfather saw me, his attitude changed instantly. He walked towards me with a kind and amiable smile. "Girl, don't be nervous. Sit down quickly. Grandpa is not a bad person. Grandpa just wants to teach this naughty grandson who bullied you a lesson. Just sit on the sofa and watch." I was dazed and was helped to sit down by Leo's family butler mother. At the moment when Leo met my gaze, he slightly curved the corners of his mouth, indicating that I shouldn't take it amiss. It seemed that he was used to kneeling. He should be able to handle it. As a result, I still overestimated him. Because in the next second, he said, "Grandpa, since Autumn is sitting, I don't need to kneel either, right?" It would have been okay if he hadn't said it. As soon as he opened his mouth, Leo's grandfather exploded. In the next second, he picked up the cane without hesitation and hit him on the back. "You brat! How dare you be so cheeky? Have you forgotten the family precepts? Previously, I introduced so many potential partners to you, but you refused to meet them. And what happened? Then you turned around and slept with this nice girl. What a misfortune for the family." While scolding, the old man hit even harder. I was shocked by this scene. What era is this? There are still people using family laws. Leo is also a powerful figure outside. When he returns home, he actually has to kneel obediently and endure the beating. I tried to plead, "Well, Leo's grandfather. Actually, this matter is not Leo's fault." That time, I drank some wine and was the first to. Before I could finish, Leo's grandfather interrupted me. "Don't plead for him. You drank alcohol. But what about him? If he hadn't had bad intentions, could this have happened? Obviously, this little brat took advantage of you when you were in a vulnerable state. Let me teach him a lesson." Leo's grandfather was really serious when he hit someone. After seeing about 10 strokes, Leo's white shirt was faintly seeping blood. I quickly stopped the old man's cane. "Stop hitting." Leo's grandfather refused and still wanted to take the cane back. During the pushing and shoving, Leo, who had been kneeling obediently, suddenly stood up and protected me behind him. "Grandpa, you can hit me, but don't push Autumn. She is pregnant." As soon as the words fell, Leo's grandfather's hand suddenly stopped in midair. After being stunned for a few seconds, his eyes suddenly lit up. Child? Are you saying that I'm going to have a great-grandson? Leo was stunned for a moment. You called me back to be beaten. But you still don't know that she is pregnant? Leo's grandfather shook his head in confusion. It turned out that he had only heard a general idea and didn't know that there was already Leo's child in my belly. I came to Leo's family this time, originally fully prepared to discuss the custody of the child. Who would have thought that after hearing the whole story, the old man directly asked me when I was going to have a wedding with Leo. Me? Grandpa? Are you changing to fast? I had to explain. Sorry. Leo's grandfather. I don't have any plans to get married for the time being. When Leo's grandfather heard this, he was silent for a while, and then glared at Leo with a look of hating iron for not being steel. You brat. What have you been doing? Why haven't you even chased your wife yet? When he said this, he didn't avoid me at all. I awkwardly turned my head away. But then I heard Leo say with a smile in his voice, well, I'm too stupid. I'm already chasing. I'll work harder. 13 that night, Leo's grandfather arranged for us to stay in the old house. He also deliberately said that there were not enough rooms, and arranged for me and Leo to be in one bedroom. The old man's thoughts were written all over his face. The bedroom had a black and white minimalist decoration style, which was clearly Leo's exclusive room. Leo took off his blood-stained shirt and asked me to help him apply the medicine. His skin was very white, and the bruises and wounds were particularly eye-catching. I took the ointment and carefully wiped it for him. My fingertips touched the skin on his back. His body temperature was a little hot. Leo suddenly spoke. His voice hoarse. Grandpa has always been looking forward to my marriage. He's a bit too enthusiastic. Don't take it amiss. I gently, Ed to show my understanding. Old people are always looking forward to having a house full of children and grandchildren. After applying the medicine, I let out a long sigh. I casually looked around the room. Suddenly, a pair of cufflinks on the cabinet attracted my attention. Why are they so familiar? I walked over as if possessed and took them in my hand, extremely shocked. Leo, how did you get this pair of cufflinks? Leo's eyes swept over the cufflinks and then fixed on my face. After a few seconds of silence, he slightly lowered his eyelashes. You gave them to me. I looked at him in disbelief. How could that be? I sold these cufflinks 8 years ago. Leo pinched the cufflinks, took a deep breath, and seemed to have made sufficient mental preparation before he began to explain. 8 years ago, there was a girl setting up a stall at the university gate who sold these cufflinks to me. There are 6 blue and white diamonds on these cufflinks. The details are exquisite. No worse than luxury high-end custom-made ones. But she only sold them to me for 800 yuan. She said that she designed them herself, that they were not a big brand and were not valuable. She sold them to raise money to buy a new mobile phone for her boyfriend. Halfway through, Leo raised his eyes and smiled self-mockingly. At that time, I thought she was very beautiful. Just a bit silly. During that time, I often passed by that street and could always see her setting up a stall selling things. If she hadn't had a boyfriend, I would definitely have chased her. Later, she graduated, and I went abroad. I thought there would be no more intersections. But who would have thought that a few years later, her works actually appeared at the global jewelry auction. Still later, she also came to me with her own jewelry brand. I watched her walk towards me step by step, and the feeling of being attracted to her was rekindled. Over these years, my upbringing has been constantly reminding me that her heart belongs to someone else, and I must not disturb her. Until that night, she suddenly staggered and fell into my arms. The night fell. Inside the room, the light was slightly yellowish. There was a night breeze coming through the window screen of the old house, bringing a gentle coolness. Leo's voice became softer and softer. That night, you kissed me on your own initiative. Autumn, tell me, how could I let you go again? I listened to all this in a daze. and Leo had already cupped my face and kissed me heavily. 14 later. I gave birth to a lovely daughter. Leo has always been by my side. But I have been slow to accept his marriage proposal. There is no special reason. It's just that I don't want to be trapped in a relationship again. Only when one has really been in a cage will one know the value of freedom. What's more, liking and marriage have never been the same thing. I don't dare to get involved easily again. My daughter takes my surname and is named Zoe. I accompanied Zoe from babbling to going to school, unconsciously. Another 7 years have passed. When the outside world talks about Leo, they all say that he has changed from a young and handsome gay-like president to a golden bachelor now. Leo has always clarified to the outside world time and time again, I'm not gay. Nor am I single. I have a girlfriend. I also have a daughter. My daughter is so beautiful. Leo's grandfather is still in good health and would often taunt him out of exasperation. Yes. You have a girlfriend and a daughter. But you don't have a wife. Your daughter still calls you uncle. Leo. Of course Zoe has known that Leo is her father since she was a child. It's just that she is too clingy to me. And every time Leo comes over, he always insists on sleeping with me. More clingy than a child. Zoe can only be coaxed away by her grandmother. So Zoe deliberately calls him, Leo Dad. Leo Dad, feeling aggrieved by his daughter, would pitifully come to me at night. He hugged me and kissed me again and again, his tone full of resentment. Autumn, you're so heartless. When will you give me a proper status? I was pinched by him at the waist, and lazily poked his abdominal muscles, depending on your performance tonight. And also on my mood tomorrow. Leo mumbled that I only gave him empty promises. The next second, he buried his head down and kissed even more fiercely and vigorously. 15 later, I heard from a friend that Yuri was dead. After Rosa had an abortion, she kept pestering Yuri and wouldn't let go. She threatened Yuri to marry her and take care of her for the rest of her life. Yuri had long been tired of her and naturally refused to compromise. He even wanted to fire her from the company. Rosa became desperate. Taking advantage of her position, she leaked company secrets to the competitors, and also secretly dug out a lot of accounting problems in the company. Yuri was in a terrible mess because of her. First, he lost several big business deals. And later, unable to hold on, his capital chain broke and the company went bankrupt. He hated Rosa so much. They had a fierce quarrel. And in anger, he accidentally pushed her downstairs, probably feeling that there was no hope in the future and his heart was dead. Yuri jumped down himself. After hearing this, I just casually agreed, so it is. There was no more ripple in my heart. So many years have passed. When I heard the name Yuri again, it seemed as if it was something from a previous life. The friend was still sighing, you know. When you were at school, you two were so good together. I still remember that Yuri brought you food every day and tutored you. He couldn't be away from you for a day. At that time, the whole girls' dormitory knew how much he loved you. How could such a good person quietly go bad later? I listened quietly, as if listening to a stranger. Mom, come and play. Not far away. The female lead waved at me. Leo was playing frisbee with our daughter and the dog. I hung up the phone in a hurry, took the frisbee from my daughter's hand and threw it far away. The dog was running freely and my daughter was laughing happily. Leo looked over at me. With that one glance, his eyes were gentle. All was quiet and still in the good old days. End of the main text from Yuri's perspective after they separated. Yuri secretly went to see Autumn 3 times. The first time was in the hospital. At that time, he was extremely headache-stricken by Rosa's pestering, coupled with long-term smoking and heavy drinking. His health was completely ruined. When his stomach problem flared up, he landed himself in the hospital. When the pain became unbearable, Yuri would always unconsciously think of Autumn. In the past, when he came back from a drinking party, even if he frowned slightly, Autumn would worry about whether he was unwell. If he vomited, Autumn would be even more distressed. He always thought that Autumn, who loved him so much, would never leave him in this lifetime. But now, he had a gastric hemorrhage and was in great pain. Yet even listening to her voice had become a luxury. Autumn had already deleted his contact information long ago. Fortunately, the chat records were still there. He listened almost pathologically to those voice messages she had sent him in the past. Honey, come and pick me up after work. MUA. By the way, take some time this year to accompany me to Iceland to see the aurora? Yuri. Mr. Yuri. Happy birthday. No overtime tonight. And don't dislike the ugly cake I made. Her presence seemed still close at hand. Playful. Sweet. Angry. He deliberately ignored those voices from the later endless quarrels. When she cried and questioned whether he still loved her or not. Only after losing her did he realize. Originally, he was not tired of Autumn. Instead, Autumn had already been integrated into his very bones and blood. Like oxygen. Seemingly unnoticed. But actually inalienable. Later, by a strange combination of circumstances, he saw Autumn in the obstetrics and gynecology department of the same hospital. Autumn was there for a prenatal checkup. Leo accompanied her all the way. The well-dressed big man served a pregnant woman and ran around personally. At that moment, Yuri used all his strength to hold back the urge to run to her to confess and beg. In order not to disturb her anymore, he fled in a sorry state. The second time he met Autumn was 3 years later. At that time, there were problems in his company. In order to seek funds, he ran around everywhere. When passing by the big screen in Times Square, he saw her jewelry advertisement. She was a designer with both commercial and artistic minds. In these years, his career had been stagnant, while she had already left him far behind. Yuri saw Autumn herself standing under the advertising screen, wearing a bright red dress. It seemed that there was some commercial event, and she was taking pictures with the reporters one by one. She was so beautiful. But he, on the other hand, was already in a sorry state and seemed unable to catch up with her anymore. Yuri's eyes turned red silently. The third time he saw Autumn was in the amusement park. The sun was very bright that day. Leo held his daughter with one hand and held an umbrella for Autumn with the other hand. The three of them were wearing very cute parent-child outfits. The little girl laughed heartily. First she called Leo Daddy Leo. As she kept calling, somehow, she suddenly changed her words and called him Daddy once. Leo seemed stunned and repeatedly confirmed with the girl, Zoe. What did you call me? Can you call me that a few more times? Quick. The little girl was a bit shy. But with Autumn's encouragement, she finally happily hugged Leo. I called you Daddy. 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 Why? Don't you want to be my daddy? Do you still want to be my daddy, Leo? For some reason, Leo seemed almost on the verge of crying with joy. And Yuri, standing far away in an inconspicuous corner, watched this scene jealously. By that time, his company had already gone bankrupt. Rosa was like a cancer, torturing him so much that he felt life was worse than death. He was so jealous that Leo could have Autumn. He regretted even more. If he hadn't been unable to resist back then, the person holding Autumn's hand now would be himself. They would have a child, and would also wear parent-child clothes. If only there were a time machine in the world. Then he could travel back to the time before he hurt Autumn. She would still be his QIU. Unfortunately, all of this had become a delusion. Rosa came to pester him again. This time, during the quarrel, Rosa threw his old mobile phone from a more than 10-story building. The phone was smashed to pieces. Yuri went completely crazy. There were Autumn's voice messages sent to him in the past in that phone. For so many years, he had been reluctant to delete them. On every sleepless and difficult night, he had to rely on those voices to quench his thirst like drinking poison. But Rosa had destroyed it. At that moment, his sanity was completely devoured. He pushed Rosa down. Go to hell, he said to Rosa, and also to himself. When his body was in the air and at the moment of falling, The howling wind whistled past his ears. QIU. If I'm gone, will you think of me occasionally? Forget it. Just forget it.